Appreciate the opportunity to talk. As Candace mentioned, I was the president of AAF Lexington back in like 2013, 14, 15 area. I was president for 2 years, had a really great group of people. I actually, uh, yeah, I mean, it was a fun time. And so AAF has a soft spot in my heart. I am a designer, so that's obviously just like a subset of advertising, but I'm a fan of advertising. I have paid attention to it since I was a kid, and yeah, so it's something that's somewhat of a passion of mine. Although technically I'm not like a traditional advertising agency creative or art director. So today I'm going to discuss ideas that advertisers can borrow from sports marketers during the COVID era. Again, Adam Martin, founder and creative director of TA Martin Studio and makers of sport. I'm going to discuss four things. One of those is doubling down on digital community. Also, we'll discuss creating additional revenue streams, tapping into nostalgia, and thinking entertainment first.
Hey, say that. Daryl.
Hey, Daryl.
How you doing?
But first, I'm going to set the table and tell you a little bit about myself. I grew up in a small town just east of Lexington, in between Moorhead and Lexington, called Mount Sterling. I was born to Tim and Vanessa Martin of Mount Sterling, Kentucky, and I'm actually an eighth generation Kentuckian, and specifically an eighth generation Kentuckian from that particular area of the state. Love this state. I'd never moved here. I stayed in essentially a 3-county radius my entire life. I grew up obsessed with art initially, so drawing everything that I could as a kid. Superheroes, really into comic books. Sports hit me probably about middle childhood, late elementary school, something like that. So once I got there, I was essentially obsessed with both, right? Drawing my favorite sports logos, drawing my favorite athletes, and that type of thing. I had some early sport influences. One of those being Slam Magazine. Slam Magazine is a basketball publication. Well, started as a basketball publication. Now it's a media company that I received at essentially it was like a church Christmas party or something. Someone had probably it was a gift exchange. Someone had just grabbed a basketball thing because they knew I was a basketball junkie, handed it to me, and this particular magazine ended up essentially changing my life. It was my first exposure to things like sneakers, and just the fashion of basketball, and basketball sort of almost really drives culture in a way. Basketball fashion and whatnot. If you think about like sneakers and music, and musicians want to be basketball players, and basketball players want to be musicians, and this type of thing. And then also the way that it was written. This was a time in my life when I'm like sixth grade. I'm in middle school and we're learning how to write. But as I'm learning how to write, quote unquote, properly, I'm reading this magazine that is being written in like kind of like a hip hop speak, right, or like a hip hop sort of language. And so it was interesting to see that like we're being told we have to write this particular way and do things this way. But I'm also seeing this thing and Walmart and being talked about all over the place that, or whichever bookstore or wherever you could find this thing that wasn't being written that way. Also, as someone that's 37 years old, I, like most people my age, was inspired by Michael Jordan growing up, Chicago Bulls, that whole thing. I'm actually wearing a shirt. I don't know if you can actually see my face right now, but in a little bit you'll see I'm actually wearing a shirt that says "I'm back," which is his announcement from his retirement, coming back from retirement back in like '96 or so. Kobe Jones I grew up playing both soccer and basketball, so both of them were very vital as far as my exposure to various cultures. Obviously, soccer being a global sport in the U.S. back then, you obviously couldn't watch a whole lot of soccer. You only saw the men's and women's national teams during like the World Cup. So Kobe Jones was a favorite of mine. He played the position that I played, and I loved his hair because I have if you've noticed from my bio, I have curly hair. So I have a kind of a have always been dealing with not being able to do like what like most quote unquote normal kids were able to do with their hairstyles growing up. And then also like most people in Kentucky, college basketball fans, specifically the 1996 Kentucky Wildcats. Sixth grade is when I was in sixth grade when this championship happened, and with obviously this being a Louisville crowd, there's a gentleman there that we can probably align on that I think probably the entire state of Kentucky does not like at this point in time. So, unbeknownst to me at the time, these were some people that were my early creative influences. I didn't know who they were then, but the work that they did really sort of led me into this path of this career that I took and this passion that's become a lifelong passion for me. The gentleman on the left, Tinker Hatfield, vice president of design at Nike. He's been there since the beginning, and he is one of the guys that designed some of the early Air Jordans and the Nike Air Max. And so in sneaker culture, he is essentially an icon. I actually even have I don't know if you can see me on camera or if you can just see my screen, but I'll show it afterwards. I've actually got a 3D action figure, quote unquote, toy of Tinker Hatfield on my desk. That's how obsessed I was with this gentleman. And then also we have Bob Greenberg. In the agency world, most of you are going to be familiar with RGA. It started as R. Greenberg and Associates. They were doing title design early on. They eventually ended up going full force into becoming a digital agency, focusing on websites and things like that in the early days, interactive. And they became Nike's digital agency. So any of the cool sort of like apps or digital experiences that would come from them. As you can tell, I'm a big Nike. Like most people in the creative industry, Nike is very influential for me. John Jay is a creative from he went to the Ohio State University, and then he got into fashion, and he ended up being a chief creative officer at Wieden & Kennedy. Wieden & Kennedy is the agency of record for Nike. They essentially built each other over the years, and John Jay he's currently at Uniqlo, which is a UK sort of product fashion / consumer product brand. But he was very pivotal in the advertising from like the 90s and the concerned. Pursued a bachelor of art in art. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew that I wanted to be a creative person. And so while I was there, I discovered this thing called graphic design. Initially, I wanted to design sneakers. Being a kid from small town Kentucky, that is an industrial that traditionally would be a product design, industrial design track. I went to Eastern. They didn't have that. Graphic design had the word design in it. So I thought, well, how much different can it be? Turns out it was vastly different, but I fell in love with it anyway. And so that I ended up getting a Bachelor of Fine Arts in graphic design, and then graduated. And upon graduation, that began my journey into something that I didn't know that existed, at least consciously didn't know that existed, and that was to work in sports marketing. And so, as mentioned earlier, it's kind of funny. I was the sort of marketing pieces for this called me a sports marketing guru. I would not actually consider myself that at all. I love it. I pay attention to it, and I write about it. But Jim Host is the OG sports marketing guru in the state of Kentucky. Jim Host founded a company called Host Communications in Lexington, and they essentially turned like what we see today as like marketing in college athletics, the NCAA, and sort of the which is obviously on the radar now as far as paying players and whatnot, and that type of fight that's coming along soon. But essentially he helped turn college sports into the sponsorship and advertising world that it is today. This picture of the KFC Yum Center, obviously you guys are familiar with that. That is in there because Jim, for many of you that don't know, well beyond his Host Communication years, was actually pivotal in getting that in the state of Kentucky, raising funding and whatnot for that. So while at Host Communications, I discovered sports design, specifically sports graphic design. I didn't really know that you could sort of specialize in something. This was new to me, and I was becoming familiar with the word sports marketing and those types of things. So while at Host Communications, I stepped into this whole world of designing things in the world of sports. Most of the things we were designing at the time would be like game programs and media guides and various sponsorship things. That's a picture of me when I was very young at the Big House in Michigan. We went to art direct a photo shoot there for the game programs for that year. And then you'll see a big SEC banner. That is essentially what was my first project. Nothing special. It's a bunch of logos thrown on a banner. Hardly any design to it, but it was just one of these things that was cool to sort of see in the real world, so to speak, when I came around a skyscraper in Nashville to see that. So I early on, after about a year at Host, I quit my job. I didn't come from a family of entrepreneurs, but I knew that I didn't like working for people. So I guess I kind of was intrinsically meant to do my own thing. So I quit my job. My then girlfriend, now wife of 12 years. We didn't have immediate plans on getting married, so I thought, well, now's the time to do it. I don't have any kids. I don't have any crazy expenses. Let me just see if I can launch into full-time freelance. This is pre-Twitter, and I think Facebook was out and LinkedIn was out. So getting work was a challenge. I didn't know how to get it, right? I wasn't taught that. I certainly didn't work in a sales role at Host Communications. So I basically learned how to develop business on my own. And because I was coming from the sports industry, through word of mouth, most of my clients ended up being in the sports business. Fortunately for me, I loved it. And it has allowed me to be self-employed for nearly 15 years now. I've operated as 3 different names. Essentially started as A. Design, rebranded to Mountain and Company, which there's a whole story behind that we won't get into because it's not necessarily under the scope of this. And then I sort of circled back around to TA Martin Studio to really sort of portray that it's me that you're getting when you work with me. And I've chosen to stay independent for consulting purposes. And I truly enjoy doing the work. I don't necessarily want to live in spreadsheets and art direct and manage people too much, although I do bring on freelancers and collaborate on things from time to time. So why sports marketing? I'm going to assume everyone knows who this is, but sports marketing, sports in general is this unifying thing, right? Almost like music is as well, but there's almost no industry where you'll see complete strangers hug each other pre-COVID, in any type of like group setting, and it sort of breaks down racial barriers, gender barriers, these types of things, and you'll just see like fans, right? I mean, everybody, I assume since you're here, you are a sports fan and you're probably a U of L fan, right? So chances are you've probably high-fived a complete stranger that you would never high-five just walking down the street, right? So that is why I love sports marketing. And is why that I've chosen to stay in it for the majority of my career. I've been very fortunate over the years to work with many clients in the sports space. These are just a few of those clients, a few of the favorites that I've been able to work with over the years, and most of my experience kind of ranges from brand to team or organization to leagues to media companies, sports marketing agencies, advertising agencies, and that type of thing. So essentially, if it's in the sports world, I will work. I will do work for it. Essentially, I've chosen to specialize in that vertical market. But as far as a horizontal perspective and the types of services that I create in there's essentially 4 buckets for that. It would be like interactive / product design, content. Content strategy, content creation, graphic design, and that type of thing. So I'll go through some work just to set the table, so to speak, and give you an idea of some various things that I have been able to do over my career. I do athlete branding on occasion. This particular logo for Tyler Eulis, former Kentucky basketball player, was created after he graduated. This actually got honored by the Clios. When the Clios branched out their awards programs into various verticals. So you'd have like Clio Healthcare, Clio Entertainment. So Clio Sports Awards. This was Sports Awards. This was honored by that. Malik Monk, former basketball player, did some work for him right after he graduated. This ended up being used for like his basketball camps down the line. For the last year, since March 2020, I've been on retainer with the Tennessee Titans, creating various types of content for them, and really kind of integrating into their as a quote unquote outsourced internal creative for them, where I just hook in with them as a part of their staff and create work for them. So this is a campaign called Code Blue, which is they wear an all baby blue uniform, and these sports teams uniforms are obviously a big thing. So they promote that every year and encourage everyone to wear their blue. And the creative director is a protege of Alex Bogusky of Crispin Porter Bogusky. So it's been cool to work, just kind of tie back in the advertising thing. And this was kind of the creative direction and then the visual execution of this particular campaign. There's various things we've done over the time. There's a lot of Derrick Henry stuff, former running back at the University of Alabama and Heisman Trophy winner and a very, very popular player for the Tennessee Titans. A lot of times in these sports teams and even in college, you'll have a particular player you're trying to promote for certain awards or whatever. So like in college, the Heisman, if a team has a Heisman candidate, they'll be doing a lot of content around that particular person and posting that content and sending that out to writers and those types of things. So it's kind of the same with the NFL. So he ended up winning back-to-back rushing titles in the league. And then there's just various things that get posted throughout time. So I'll kind of go through this a little quickly to get into the four main items, because we're already at 12:30. This was Superhero Day, like social, the content calendars, create things for whatever. Everybody loves Baby Yoda. For May the 4th, Star Wars Day. And yeah, so just various things. A lot of times in the sports world, especially there's this thing called Wallpaper Wednesday, hashtag Wallpaper Wednesday. And so it almost becomes like a flexing of the creative muscles, so to speak, for sports teams to try to compete with other teams and post things out there, the digital properties to post things out there into the world, to see what you can do that's cool and what resonates with fans. Most people are really focused on like what you can do with your, impressing your fans, more so than impressing like other creatives and designers and that type of thing. And then sometimes, this was one for their tagline for the season was Tennessee Tough, with the tornado that happened last March, I believe. So that was, they really wanted to play that up for the year. And there was kind of the whole design direction for everything kind of gave like a Hat Show Print vibe, which is a famous print shop in Nashville that does like all the Grand Ole Opry posters. This is a piece for the Boston Red Sox. They invited 19 artists to do 19 pieces for Big Papi when he retired. And so this is essentially what I did here was took 19 fonts and overlaid them over each other to kind of create like a unique number, 34. So it's like every season is completely different, but the collective still sort of brings about like, gives you the visual output of like the number 34, even though there's like 19 different perspectives from those numbers within that. I did the athletics identity for Transylvania down in Lexington. This was an interesting project. It was a multi-year process. There was a massive sort of snafu in the first round where the marketing team sort of freaked out last minute and put out a bunch of like thrown together pieces, and then said, let's let the public vote instead of kind of sticking with the research and the strategy and all of the things that we'd done initially. So the word marks and what eventually became like this particular icon ended up coming out into the world later, and it ended up being a pretty big hit. Compositing work. This is Drone Racing League, PGA Tour illustrations. This is Hank Aaron in Atlanta. I was working for the Atlanta Braves. They wanted to put together a clothing line. He's the home run king, hit 755 home runs. So these are some concepts for that. Youth sports, various visual identity strategy for a youth sports organization. And then now to sort of circle back around, Slam Magazine is the thing that sort of like set me in motion on what I wanted to do when I grew up. I've for the last few years actually been working with Slam Magazine. So it's like this kind of this very interesting circle that happened for me many years of just being passionate about this stuff. And so these are some spreads from the magazine that I've designed. So getting to work in that magazine, and it's sort of dream come true type stuff, especially for a guy who is essentially a small town Kentucky kid, right? Who's not supposed to go and do these things. And not only that, but hasn't moved anywhere, right? Like has lived in these areas my entire life. So just some Braves work. Now we'll get into, so Makers of Sport. Makers of Sport is essentially why I'm here. And it's also why, it's also probably why I do work for Slam and I do work for all these people, because I think when you are a graphic design, someone like a graphic designer, there's really no reason for a company in New York to hire me, right? When there are probably a million graphic designers in New York. I believe in specialization, and so specializing in sports has allowed me to have a vertical knowledge and expertise that people want to know that I know their industry, right? And so in this particular case, back in 2014, I've been an avid podcast listener since inception, right? I mean, I think I discovered my first graphic design podcast when it was like 2007 or something. And so I wanted to start something that I was always looking for, which was a show about design and sports. And so came up with the idea, had no clue how to do it. Now podcasting is very popular now, so there's tons of YouTube videos and these types of things that will teach you exactly what to do, what equipment to buy. I actually figured this out on my own and ended up creating Makers of Sport. So it's led me to many places in the world of sport. A lot of people are like, well, how much money do you make from Makers of Sport? And it's like, well, Makers of Sport makes hardly any money, right? I've got like a little community that people pay to be a part of, but it's really you can't put a monetary value on the content marketing this has actually done for me as a creative, right? Or like the experiences that it's actually provided me as a creative. So these are on the picture on the left. This is a conference I went to. Every single one of those people have been on my show. And then, I get invited to various things, Naismith Awards brunch, media passes to various football events and that type of thing. And then I also create products, right? So as a part of building a brand, I want to put things out into the world that resonates with my audience. And so whether it's like t-shirts or these there's a company in Boston called Huntington Baseball Company. I made some custom baseballs with them. They're handmade baseballs made like the old school way to give those away to some of my audience. And then also this baseball bat is from a company in Nashville called Mitchell Bat Company, and he basically hand paints bats. So a lot of different things that I do to try to really quote unquote build a brand around the podcast, right? And what started as a podcast is really, I would almost consider just a media brand now, right? Because I'm very active on Twitter, I'm posting there and these types of things. But because of that media brand, because of that side project, it's led to many, many things, right? As I said, making graphic design work is not really that interesting, in my opinion. Even though I love design, I love being a designer. It doesn't differentiate me from anyone else, right? Any other designers. So I've been featured in Front Office Sports, which is essentially like a Forbes for the sports business. Been considered one of the top Sport Techie, which is a sports tech website, been considered one of the top follows on there. UniWatch is a guy that used to write for ESPN, and he does this blog specifically focused on what the players wear and that type of thing. So I've been able to have all these amazing opportunities from Makers of Sport, and this is the particular opportunity that is leading us to this talk. I was invited by Adweek to write about how sports marketers are evolving in the COVID-19 era. And now, something to keep in mind, when this article was written, it was August, right? Well, it was pre-August because this posted August 7th. So this is a time when the NBA had I think was still in their bubble, and teams were trying to figure out, and the NFL was going to try to play, but they weren't 100% sure that they were going to play and that type of thing. So we'll kind of get into these things. One thing that's interesting about sport, and I didn't mention this earlier, but that sport is a form of escapism, right? Like there are people that sort of have daily life struggles and these types of things, and what do? They go home and watch the Yankees at night or whatever, right? And so this particular image, as someone that was a freshman in college when 9/11 happened, I vividly remember this sort of moment where, politics aside, but when the president at the time threw out the first pitch at the Yankees game, right? Like it was with the FDNY jacket on, like it was this massive sort of unifying moment in the country, right? Where people were like, we're back, and you can't stop us. We're gonna come together, and sports is one of the beautiful ways that the whole world, honestly, but especially this country in baseball or whatnot, does that. But sports is always there. I remember saying for many years, sports is not going anywhere, right? Like sports is a safe industry to work in because it's not going to disappear. But in March 2020, everything completely changed, right? Everybody remembers the Sports Center moment, the NBA game where they come out and they basically cancel the game, right? And then all of a sudden it was like once the NBA canceled their game, snowball effect across the whole world, right? Premier League, baseball, the Masters, everybody was canceling everything. So this is a whole new world that the sports world has to figure out, right? Because historically, the product's always there, and now it's not. Obviously, there were no sports to market. I mean, there were just constant articles. The news basically became about cancelizations, right? So you had these massive multi-million-dollar deals in jeopardy, right? Where Under Armour is canceling their contracts to save cash. People are losing revenue because of not being able to broadcast a live product. The force majeure clause in a lot of contracts, that's sort of like standard language in almost every contract, where it's like, this quote unquote act of God like came in and you can sort of cancel all these things. So what are we going to do? What is the sports industry going to do? How is it going to survive? To sort of set the table, there are essentially three main revenue sources in sport. One is broadcast, the other is sponsorship, and the other is ticket revenue. Well, ticket revenue is completely unreliable at this point, right? So, I mean, we knew that no one was going to be coming into events. So if no one's coming into the events have to happen. They have to find a way to make something happen, right? Because they have these massive contracts with these broadcasters. So how did sports marketers evolve? They had to get creative, right? And so this kind of takes us back to the initial four topics, which is doubling down on digital community. So we'll start there. I am going to actually show you. I'm going to flip over real quick, and we're going to watch this commercial that I think will sort of set the table for this, so to speak. Geography no longer matters. So I'm going to play this. And Candace, if you can just kind of give me like a thumbs up when this plays, if you can hear the audio.
To the Pittsburgh native supporting a different black and gold.
Hey, come on, scarf up.
The fan a walk from Wrigley Field who's just as drawn to the octagon.
No, not now, no.
And the Indiana man who bleeds magic blue.
Kenny should have won a title.
You're the reason we're here.
Yeah, I just wish you weren't like here.
If tennis is your cup of tea,
You guys know Naomi?
or fantasy is your priority,
Nah, do your own research.
this is your stream. ESPN Plus. It exists because you do.
So that is a spot by an agency in Austin called Preacher, and it essentially it is what it is, right? Like it's essentially telling us that like geography doesn't matter anymore, right? Like ESPN Plus exists because these like the fan in Indiana that's an Orlando Magic fan exists, right? So that is one way that sport has been able to do that. Another way, and this is one of the first things that I wrote about. There's been various other happenings along these lines since then, but this was one of the first collegiate sports properties that really did something interesting, and this is what I covered in my article. And Wake Forest Athletics had just hired an assistant athletic director for marketing that came from Mississippi State named Rhett Hobart, who I've actually known for quite some time. They ended up creating this sort of virtual ticket experience, right? Like we got to find a way to make revenue, we got to find a way to save things, or to sort of quote unquote sell our product. And so they really doubled down on digital and their content team. A lot of these content teams now, and at least the sort of like major D1 or Power 5 conferences have like world class creators that they can sort of bring content to the world 24/7. So they partnered with this company called FanMaker, who essentially provided them with analytics and a platform to provide exclusive content to their fans, right? And so there's varying levels of price membership, VIP virtual events, future on-site discounts, and then even then like post in hindsight, now that they've played their seasons and we're this far out, like they've decided to continue this type of thing long term. So this really just provided a whole nother opportunity for them to get their fans involved from a digital perspective and to kind of stay in front of them, so to speak. Creating additional revenue streams. So another thing, and I mentioned it, right? Like there's these brands have world-class professionals, from not just marketing to content to creative to think about the team physicians to nutritionists to any trainers. They have a lot of money put into these people, and they're very high level, right? So one way that they were able, some of these sports brands were able to evolve, is to take some of this stuff and bring it to the consumer market. So Chelsea Football Club, global soccer club, over in the UK, this guy Christian Pulisic, he's an American that plays for them. They created this whole new, essentially, company called Chelsea Digital Ventures. And what Chelsea Digital Ventures is a digital first consumer product business. And so they're actually leveraging their in-house professionals to sell a product to consumers outside of the whole ticketing space and apparel space and these types of things. So the one on the left, Perfect Play, is a training app, and it's each of these are subscription-based products. Blue Fuel has obviously a physical component where you get some of the actual the food, but they're basically using their in-house people, their in-house professionals and expertise to take that and to sell a product to consumers. And so these are two examples from Chelsea. Perfect Play. My son actually uses Perfect Play. We're soccer people, and you'll actually notice I've got a little bit of a soccer bias. There's a lot of soccer content in this particular presentation, but these are subscription products, and we pay a fee, and so for me personally, I mean, I would, rather than paying some like YouTube guy that coached some youth club in middle of nowhere, I'd rather pay Chelsea because I know that I'm getting a quality product, right? And I know that they're going to evolve, their content is going to evolve with the with time. A couple of other ideas, and some of these sort of spawned up prior to COVID, but they really doubled down during COVID, and that is the tech startup world, right? Like everybody talks, you hear the word startups everywhere, all tech startups and incubators and venture capital funds and yada, 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 right? And so companies, some of these brands or organizations are creating their own startup incubators to invest in products and services that are kind of adjacent to what they do, right? Like it doesn't necessarily have to be in sports, but it's got to be some type of like entertainment or some type of, food. I mean, a lot of these companies, like some of these big NBA teams, are actually owned by real estate companies, right? That own like the stadium. And so there's like, you think about food and all types of like entertainment that's within the stadium and those types of things. So these are various ideas that have been passed or that have started from these brands that are investing in the future of sport and entertainment. Tapping into nostalgia. Okay, so I mentioned earlier I'm 37 years old. I'm an older millennial. It's very weird. Millennials are getting into like middle age, right? So like we are seeing, like when we see nostalgic things happening, right? Like the Pizza Hut logo. Like that sort of really, the rebranding and kind of going back to the old school Pizza Hut logo, like that really resonates with me because I remember that as a kid. Or like when Air Jordan releases these like Air Jordan 3s that like my mom was like, those are $100. I'll never pay $100 for sneakers, right? Which now these things are like $300. So it's, I'm not paying up $300 for sneakers at this age. But retro is cool, right? And it's an opportunity to leverage these sort of sport or pop culture history for new content and new ideas. So we'll get into some of the ways that teams have done this. So Ashley Strauss is the creative director of the Detroit Lions, and she is a great friend of mine. She comes to Lexington to visit me from time to time. Actually, if you guys want to speak, I could probably make an introduction. But what they did was they created this thing called Lions Replay, and they watched one of their sort of most popular games. Their famous, a very sort of interesting game in the Lions space that was a total barn burner, so to speak, right? And they ended up getting a sponsor for that. And what they did was they created live content around the game, And so they created live content around the game as if it were happening in this current time period, and they got a sponsor for it, and they got to do like breakdowns of where the quarterback comes in and they're like, so what did you think on that final drive, right? And it's almost like their own, quote unquote ESPN 30 for 30 in a way. And not only that, but like this is, if you look at the date, like this is April, right? So that's not NFL season, but this is something now that they can do indefinitely, right? In the spring, they can go back and watch a YouTube game or whatever. And some of these other brands have done this. A colleague of mine at the Chiefs, Jordan Giesler, like he's the creative director there. The Chiefs are coming off of the Super Bowl season, a Super Bowl winning season at that time period. And so what they did was they did a relive party, which is to go back and watch that particular Super Bowl season. And so they're creating various content around it. My colleague at Texas football, Matt Lang, he created, ESPN was rerunning the 2006 BCS National Championship, which is a landmark moment in Texas football where they beat USC. And so they went, social media wasn't even around then, right? Like in the context that it is today. So they went and created content around this. And so I know what you're saying, like, oh, well, these are big multi-million-dollar football production houses and all these things. But, here's an example of a brand, right? So like Still, I think that's how you say it. I'm not 100% sure, but they drove a lot of, and I got a typo there in my thing. But they drove a lot of like new fans to their content throughout COVID because their actual timber sporting events weren't happening. So thinking entertainment first. I think that most of us that are associated with kids or have kids, we are very familiar with this image, right? Like these are the companies that are competing with sports today. It's not the team next door, right? Like I can tell you from experience, my own son, he's 11 years old. He plays club soccer. We go play games. He loves the sport, but when we come home, he has no desire to watch it. None. He can't name any players. He knows nothing about it. All he wants to do is jump on and play Fortnite or Call of Duty, and maybe you can get him on FIFA, just to keep like a soccer focus in that sense. But this is what we have to compete with, right? This is the future, and these kids are all going to grow up one day. So this is something we need to think about moving forward. All brands. So FC Barcelona, another global soccer club. They are a true innovator in the world of sport. And so what they have done is they've doubled down on creating original content. They launched a whole new content area, and they're focusing on kids content, right? And so like they're trying to really nail down like 5 to 9 year olds and get them integrated with the brand and to become a fan of Barcelona. And it's not just soccer stuff. I mean, there are soccer balls sort of infused in their stuff, but it's not a soccer only show, right? This is like a Paw Patrol-esque type thing. Also esports, they've one of the first clubs to launch a Twitch channel where they're bringing live content, throughout that type of thing to their viewers. And there's really kind of like this back and forth conversation happening throughout these people. Okay, so 12:46. Let me see if I can speed up here. So they've really doubled down on creating digital content and that type of thing. AC Milan, this is a Italian football soccer club. They launched a media house and are going to sort of broadcast their own original content. And so how might this all be applied locally, right? Like we talked about, these are easy examples for me to use in the world of sport because these are like multi-million-dollar, sometimes billion-dollar organizations, right, that have the resources to create these types of opportunities. But we're all advertising people here, right? We're all creative people. So we need to be creative and think about ways that we can take some of this stuff and use this locally, right? Like perhaps a restaurant sells a digital cookbook or starts a cook at home YouTube channel or food review Instagram account. Maybe maybe a local brewery hosts a quote unquote startup incubator or like a Shark Tank, the Mark Cuban show where they come in and test the product and maybe even their marketing of the product and that type of thing. Healthcare companies can produce original content to stay healthy at home. Legacy brands can dive into their archive and tell stories about the past. I think about a local brand that's near and dear to me, L81, right? Like the software drink. I mean, it's right next to where I grew up in Winchester, Kentucky. And so being, they've done a pretty decent job of kind of bringing out things from the past and that type of thing. Perhaps local t-shirt companies or brands, you can steal these ideas, right? Like these games are on YouTube. You know what I'm saying? Like you can go to YouTube and be like, we're going to watch the 96, whatever, and we're going to live post content and really try to like rally your people around it. User generated content is also a very big thing. Anytime you can get your followers or your fans to or customers to be brand advocates and post their content and make them feel good about themselves and that type of thing. That's a great opportunity to do so. So thank you for letting me do this.